The Cheryl Lacey Show, where curiosity meets courage. And I'm very pleased to announce that we've got Sharon Rondeau with us again today, the editor of the Post and Email. And Sharon's work is critical in getting truth out there. And so much of what Sharon shares with the world is something that you don't necessarily get through mainstream media. So it's always an absolute pleasure to have Sharon on the show. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's great to be on again.
Thank you. Sharon, we're going to be talking about Ilhan Omar. Now, she is a politician that serves as a representative for Minnesota's Congress, isn't she? And she's quite a personality, if I could say that.
You're right about that. She's in the news quite a bit. She is a representative from Minnesota's 5th congressional district. Every state is divided into a number of districts depending on the population, and Minnesota 5 happens to be her district. This is her 4th term, I believe, and she's been in the news a lot because the House Oversight Committee, the U.S. House of Representatives, has launched an investigation actually into her husband's finances.
Now, her husband's finances, are we talking about the husband she has now or the historical allegation that she married her brother, being his finances?
Very good question. It would be the former. She is married now for the 3rd time to a political consultant named Tim Minette. The political consulting is one thing he does, but he co-founded 2 other businesses, and it's those businesses James Comer, who is the chairman of the committee, is focusing on having to do with possible fraud and allegations of some customers being cheated and things like that. There have been some lawsuits. I was reading up on it this afternoon. And then the other company, there were 2 of them, Rose Lake Capital and East Street Crew, I think is how it's pronounced. And they both reported, Omar on her financial disclosures reported an enormous surgency of money. They were both worth very little in the 5 figures back in 2023. And then suddenly now, 2025 was the disclosure. They've catapulted to being worth in the $30 millions of dollars. So, of course, Representative Comer, being the chairman of the committee, is concerned that there could be undue influence going to his companies where they're really trying to get to Ilhan Omar as a member of Congress. So they're looking at that carefully, I understand.
So we're talking about potential bribery. We're talking about fraud, obviously. And with what's been going on in Minnesota, with the amount of money that's been funneling through from the feds, particularly these childcare centres and other entities, is it feasible that some of this wealth, this alleged $30 million, is also associated with funding flowing to them directly?
Yes, there is a possibility, and that has been suggested in news reports only because there have been some people who worked on Ilhan Omar's staff who were implicated, and at least one of them was, I think she entered a guilty plea. And did get, I believe that there was some jail time there, but she was convicted, or you could say a guilty plea is kind of like a conviction, you're admitting it. So there has been some documented involvement of that. People who did a great job digging all of this up was the article we talked about the last time, dated November 19th, 2025, and that was by, let me think of his name now, Christopher, I can get it to you, but it was published at City Journal, and they did a fabulous job digging up all of this, the relationships of some of Ilhan Omar's staff members to this actual fraud that apparently was ongoing for many years and was reported on to Democrat officials who were in charge of the state, and they report having been retaliated against, losing their jobs, or being threatened. So this has been going on a very long time. So there is fraud sort of surrounding Ilhan Omar's circle, if you will. And it's very, very curious, to say the least. So the committee will have its work cut out for it.
They will indeed, and when other people are implicated, that's the beginning of doors opening, isn't it? Because it means that those that are, as we say, implicated, they have their own issues to deal with, and suddenly there's nowhere to hide. If she and her husband have been involved in these alleged crimes, eventually the cracks start to appear.
That is absolutely true. I just remembered that the author of the article is Christopher Rufo. He's on news reports quite a bit. He wrote the article along with a co-writer whose name I cannot remember now, but they did an excellent job, and they described the relationships they found. And from what I saw, there was some very good sourcing. And yes, one thing is leading to another. Her current husband is Tim Minette. She married him in 2020, and there was also another question about her campaign funds going to was another company he co-funded named the E Street Group, and I read up on that also today. And she did stop the relationship. Her expenditures went way down after she did that. In other words, her campaign was paying E Street Group, which was co-owned by Tim Minette, who she had married, millions of dollars, and Fox News reports that those expenditures were cut perhaps in half, as much as in half, after she said, well, there'd been some real complaints about it, and she said, well, I don't want to give the impression of impropriety, so I will stop using my husband's company for political consulting. And then her campaign's expenses went way down. So there are, in other words, she got the same services from other places, other consulting firms. So there are really three companies that are sort of questionable, I guess you could say. But E Street Group, she supposedly rectified that. And as you know, there's an underlying question about whether or not Ilhan Omar is a U.S. citizen. And I'm thinking that, just as you said, once they peel the layers back of the onion, they may get to this citizenship question ultimately.
Well, that was going to be my next question. My understanding is that she was born in Somalia and then spent some time in a Kenyan refugee camp before coming to the United States. Is that correct, or is that just online rumour?
No, that is correct, and she does report that on her various campaign websites. Of course, a new website is set up for each campaign, which is every 2 years. That's how they do it here in the House of Representatives. So, yes, that is true. She was born in Somalia. From excerpts I read of her book, and I read quite a bit, she lived in relative comfort in Somalia. Now, we know their country doesn't really have a government, or they don't have police services or anything like that. It's very disorganized, to say the least. And there was a civil war. And reportedly, that is what caused her family to be pushed out of Somalia to Kenya. They stayed there for several years, as much as 5 years, I read. And in fact, that's what she says in her bio. And then she came to the United States. The reported date is March 8th, 1995. They were brought to Virginia, and then after some time, it may have been a year or less, they went to Minnesota, and specifically the Minneapolis area. So we do know she's foreign-born, and we have many foreign-born members of Congress, as probably the world knows. It's perfectly legal as long as they naturalize as a U.S. citizen. But there are big questions as to whether or not she ever did that.
Okay, so it's not about being born overseas, it's about denouncing that and becoming a US citizen, because is it accurate that you cannot have more than one citizenship in the United States?
We do allow dual citizenship. I'm not quite sure how that works, but it is allowed. I don't think our Constitution ever embraced that. That's sort of been taken on later by congressional statutes. But you must, as you said, you must renounce your allegiance to any other country to become a U.S. citizen. That's what you have to do. And I suppose there's a way you could retain or regain citizenship to another country, but you must be a citizen of the U.S. And simply speaking, her background does not show any evidence that she ever naturalized. Had she taken the oath of allegiance, there is a test, at least one test you have to take, many probably, I think, more than one, and you have to study, you have to know civics, probably better than most Americans do, and then you're tested on that. Fluency in English, knowledge of U.S. history, and things like that. And you also have to have resided here 5 years. She claims to have received citizenship through her father's naturalization, which is an option if you're a minor, meaning you're under the age of 18. And there's no evidence that happened. And as you know, there was an investigator who looked into this, and she was told in writing by the agency she queried that there are no documents supporting that claim.
She's got her work ahead of her, hasn't she, to be able to justify all of this money and also her citizenship. If this was to turn out to be true, these allegations, what would that mean for her, and what would it mean for the United States more broadly? Because this would be a case in point that would set precedents for others.
Very good question. I would think she would have to be expelled immediately. I would think there would then be a criminal case that would be launched against her by the Department of Justice. Now, President Trump has suggested, in fact, he's more than suggested, she is under investigation with the Justice Department. They haven't elaborated on every suspicion they have. And what he has said, what President Trump has said, is that, and there is a creditable allegation that she married a blood brother. That's part of this, to get him over into the United States. That appears, from what I have read, and I have done some reporting and researching on it, it appears to hold water, to be valid. Now, if that's the case, just that alone, even if she is a naturalized U.S. citizen and she's in Congress legally, bringing the brother over and they went to a Christian minister and she said, we're in love, or whatever she said, we want to get married. And the Christian minister married them. It happened to be a female minister. And she didn't know them. So she married them. And doing that with the purpose of bringing someone over just to get him into the country. And then she got him, access to financial aid to attend university here, which he did. They both did. That is a crime because they would have had to lie on the application for his visa. And in fact, our Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, who is also known herself to be controversial, she makes bold statements and takes bold actions. She has said that up to 50% of specifically Somali applications for visas are falsified. That's what they have found. It doesn't mean Ilhan Omar or her purported blood brother did this, but there is a possibility because a lot of things don't seem to add up here. He later went back to the UK, and it's alleged that the last name Omar isn't even hers, and that his last name is really her last name. It can be looked up in everything I've written about it, but his last name was Elmi, Elmi.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, Sharon, and the amount of work that's required to pull all of this together, given that we're talking about marriage, we're talking about citizenship, we're discussing fraud, we're talking about multiple marriages. The list goes on. So your research is impeccable and very much appreciated, and thank you for sharing this. And again, you're going to have to come back as this unfolds because you are the source, and we're very grateful.
Well, I'd love to be back on, and thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Have a great day, Sharon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Sharon Rondeau from the United States discussing Ilhan Omar and the implications of these allegations and the impact it will have not just on her, but also likely the United States more broadly as a precedent is set if it is found that she is guilty for any of these charges.